And we are going to call this House to order, and we are going to debate the motion: human activity is responsible for global warming. Human activity is responsible for global warming. For the proposition, Lauren. Also for the proposition, Sam. Opposing the proposition, C-Pand, whatever, and also opposing the motion, Sack. Okay, Austin, you want to call the House to order?
Oh yeah, should I go through time signals first?
Yes, go through time signals first.
Okay, do you want me to count down minutes or should I'll just do the first
Yeah, count down.
Count down? Okay. So then, obviously doing time signals, you guys have 7 minutes for the speeches and then 3 for cross-ex. So I'll slap the table after the first minute and then count down 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes. Slap the table 1 minute, 30 seconds, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. So, are they forward enough? Okay. And then you have 15 seconds grace period, and then I'll keep slapping the table after 15 seconds.
And do we get, so we get like a time, like a timeout type thing, like 3 minutes? How do we do that?
Oh, do we get 3 minutes prep time?
I saw that, I read that on the debate outline that was on the class website.
Yeah. Okay, I guess we're not doing that.
Do you need 3 minutes prep
I was
time?
just curious.
No.
You want me? It's actually not. It's not a bad idea.
Not a bad idea before rebuttals. Okay. That's fine. Let's begin, Lauren.
So we call this House to order on the motion of human activity is responsible for global warming, and you recognize Lauren to give a speech not to exceed 7 minutes in length. You're here.
First of all, thank you all for coming today to judge our first debate. I am Lauren and this is Sam. Topic of this debate is a proposition of fact. Our team will be presenting the affirmative or the government side for the topic, human activity is responsible for global warming. Both our side and the opposition have agreed upon the following definitions prior to the debate that can be found in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. We ask that in judging the debate you do so in accordance with these definitions. First, human activity is something that people do or cause to happen. Second, responsible is to account as the primary cause, motive, or agent. Global warming refers to an increase in the Earth's atmospheric and oceanic temperatures widely predicted to be due to an increase in the greenhouse effect. In assessing the truth and determining the winner of this debate, we would like the audience to use the following criteria. First is preponderance of evidence. This refers to the greater weight of evidence that is required in order to decide in favor of one side of the debate or the other. We want you to determine this preponderance of evidence based on deciding which evidence is more convincing in its probable accuracy rather than which side presents more evidence. Second criteria is the quality of evidence. We acknowledge that for this evidence, for this audience, a high quality of evidence is needed in order to gain adherence. This means that evidence should be from credible sources, meaning peer-reviewed scholarly articles and journals. Evidence should also be recently published and should not be dated and should be varied, meaning that it should be drawn from a wide variety of sources. Now that I've introduced you all to the topic of the debate, as well as provided a little guidance on how you ought to judge the outcome, I will now present an overview of our stance on why we are asserting that human activity is responsible for global warming. The fact that the Earth is warming is widely accepted among scientists. Not only do scientists agree that warming is occurring, but they also agree that this is due to human activity. NASA's report on global climate change states that more than 97% of actively publishing scientists agree that global warming trends are most likely due to human activity. So, we have established that there is a scientific consensus that human beings are responsible for global warming. Now I would like to address the question of how human beings are responsible. This is mainly occurring because humanity's carbon emissions are creating a disastrous greenhouse effect. The natural greenhouse effect on Earth is critical to sustaining life. This is because the planet's natural atmosphere contains active gases that radiate energy in all directions, including toward the surface of the planet, thus warming it. Human activities, such as increased burning of fossil fuels since the Industrial Revolution, has intensified the greenhouse effect by emitting an overload of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. The majority of the scientific community agrees that such an increase in greenhouse gases is the major cause of the global climate warming trend. The United States Environmental Protection Agency states that carbon dioxide is the primary greenhouse gas that is emitted as a result of human activity, accounting for about 80.9% of all U.S. greenhouse gas emissions in 2014. I now want to address how the term global warming differs from short-term atmospheric fluctuations. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration defines the Earth's natural climate variability as natural, short-term fluctuations in the climate system that occur on a year-to-year basis or longer. However, this is not what we are referring to in the context of global warming. Global warming refers to the long-term trend, or changes over the course of a century or more, rather than natural fluctuations that occur from year to year or even from decade to decade. Natural variability exists and is driven by a variety of things, from the sunspots to solar activity, volcanic eruptions, to the orbit and rotation of the Earth. We concede that these things may in fact cause the rate of warming to change from one decade to the next, but scientists are in agreement that long-term warming is underway, and that is the focus of our debate today. The American Chemical Society recently published findings from the exploration of vast ice sheets that cover Antarctica and Greenland. Ice cores have been bored out of these sheets and are made up of layers of ice that have been built up from over hundreds of thousands of years of snowfall. As the snow fell, air became trapped within the snow, creating little bubbles in the ice. By taking samples of the ice from different layers, we can measure the gases that were trapped at different time periods. The findings were presented in a graph, which plotted time from as early as 400,000 years ago until today, and the amount of carbon dioxide in the air during each year. It shows that there are peaks and valleys that correspond to higher and lower amounts of carbon. Measurements from the cores show that the valleys of less CO2 correspond to ice ages when the Earth was colder, and peaks of more CO2 correspond to warmer periods, like now. The most recent 1,000 years are represented by a big jump at the end of the graph. By zooming in, one can see that CO2 rises a little bit around 1800, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and climbs rapidly near the end of the 20th century. The increased carbon dioxide in the air since the beginning of modern industry is larger than any change in the past hundreds of thousands of years, showing that human activity is indeed responsible for global warming. To further convince you that humanity's carbon emissions are creating a disastrous greenhouse effect, I will now cite a 2015 peer-reviewed study published by the American Meteorological Society. This study reveals that there is in fact a linear relationship between global mean temperature change and cumulative CO2 emissions. The study uses a popular scientific metric that directly relates carbon emissions to global surface temperature change called TCRE, which stands for the Transient Climate Response to Cumulative CO2 Emissions. To study TCRE, the research team conducted a variety of simulations based on the University of Victoria Earth System Climate Model. The study revealed that TCRE is near constant over a range of cumulative emissions up to 200 petagrams of carbon. Once emissions reach this point, the climate response shifts to a warming effect. So you can imagine our climate like a sink. The sink, or the atmosphere, fills up with CO2, and as this happens, some of the CO2 is also going down the drain. This draining occurs because the ocean, which covers 71% of the Earth, absorbs some of this carbon, stabilizing the temperature of our atmosphere. These simulations and analysis show that the relationship is maintained as long as the ocean uptake of carbon dominates the airborne fraction of carbon. But when the sink overflows, the relationship breaks down. This breakdown in the balance between the ocean's uptake of carbon and humanity's emissions creates the global warming trend that we have witnessed over recent years. In the last 100 years, humanity has undergone massive industrialization. Carbon emissions have increased at a proportionally drastic rate. These emissions also contain greenhouse gases, which transform the greenhouse effect from one that allows us to live comfortably into one that is rapidly making the world more inhospitable and warmer overall. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chair will now recognize a cross-examination period not to exceed 3 minutes in length. Please stand close together so we can get you both on camera. A little more this way, yeah, good. Good, you're tall, yeah. You move that way, both of you? Yeah, move that way, yeah. Okay, good, thank you. Good.
Alrighty, so just a few questions. So you said that as CO2 goes up, temperature increases, correct?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
okay. So on that graph that we saw in the movie, Al Gore's movie, it said that, and stated by many scientific journalists, the CO2 and the temperature were right on top of each other, correct?
I do not know the graph that you're referring to. I unfortunately missed that class, so I don't.
Okay, well there was a graph.
I don't recall it now. I'm
Okay,
sorry, yeah.
no worries. Either way, I was wondering, that kind of doesn't help. So, basically you're saying that as CO2 increases, temperature increases, correct?
Generally, yes.
Okay, so you would agree with me in saying that human CO2 emissions have constantly increased and never decreased?
I said that after the onset of the Industrial Revolution, there was a rapid rise in CO2 emissions due to human activity.
So, yes?
So, yes.
Okay, cool.
Look at your audience, not your opponent. Okay, you're trying to persuade us, not her.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
So then, based on your brief, if man-made CO2 consistently increases, temperature must consistently increase as well if CO2 is increasing. If CO2, temperature is a cause of CO2.
I would like the audience to acknowledge the overall warming trend, not the fluctuations from year to year. Yeah.
So the long-term trend then?
The long-term trend is, yes.
Okay, awesome. So as I'll go into in my brief, over the last century, there was an increase of 0.07 degrees Celsius in the temperature. But from now, we are actually in a cooling as of 1998. From 1998 to now, if you prolong that over a century, the rate that it's at, it's actually decreasing at 1 degree Celsius. So as we can see, temperature and CO2 are not directly correlated. Thanks.
Thank you.
We think Zach, to that cross-examination, opens upon to open the case for the opposition side.
Sapon.
Can I start?
Let me get you in focus. Okay, rock and roll, Sapon. What?
So, hi, my name's Stefan.
Hi, Stefan.
We call him Zack Attack. So, I wanted to start my brief with a little background information. I think, like most people, when I came into this class, I believed that human activity was responsible for global warming. And when I watched the Al Gore movie, it only reaffirmed my views. But then something changed. When we watched the Swindle movie, I had my first bit of doubt about this idea. I thought, why did I believe that humans were responsible for global warming? I had never done any research on it. How did I just come to this conclusion? And I realized I had just heard it from politicians, and I'd heard it so many times, it just became a fact. And there were two things that the politicians kept saying that made me stay on their side. The idea that there was this consensus among scientists, and the idea that our side was completely dominated by the oil and gas industry. So I wanted to start my brief with telling you how I researched further into these two ideas and what I found out, because I think it will surprise you. First is consensus. I remember when I kept hearing this from the politicians, I thought, if there's a consensus among scientists, who am I to disagree? I kept hearing this 97% number, and I think you guys have heard it a lot too. So I researched more into it. I thought, one thing I found interesting was an article by the Washington Times, in which David Lee Gates, a professor of climatology at the University of Delaware, said that based on how they do the results, do the surveys, he's not surprised that there's 100% consensus. He said, those touting the 97% figure ask simplistic, obvious questions for which nearly 100% consensus can be attained. And then they pretend that saying, I believe in climate change, somehow means I believe in anthropogenic global warming will be disastrous. Second, the idea that our side is being completely funded by the gas industry. This was definitely something that made me distrust our side. And something I thought about was that if they're really contributing all this money, then they're doing a bad job, because the popular opinion is on their side. But the truth is there's funding on both sides. And as far as our side, we did find some organizations like the NIPCC and the George Mason Foundation, and some others that were funded by ExxonMobil. But in order to remain as pure as possible, we only took evidence from independent scientists like professors at universities. But unfortunately, the same cannot be said about the government. So something I thought about was, why does it matter that humans are responsible for global warming? Why can't it be enough to say that global warming exists? Because if the government can say that humans are responsible, they can also say that humans can reverse it. And guess who's ready to take the baton? The green energy companies. which Al Gore has made a killing off of. So Peter Schweitzer of the Hoover Institution details that 16 out of the $21 billion in loans granted from 2008 to 2011 by the federal government, and 4 out of every 5 energy companies backed by the Energy Department of the government were run or primarily owned by financial backers of the politicians. Now, as for the IPCC, which I'd never heard before, but I kept hearing it used by the government side in previous debates. So I looked into it and I found that it was a subset of the United Nations, and I found something more interesting. Raj Pachwari, a former chairman of the IPCC, admitted in an interview in September 2013 with the London Guardian, he said, quote, "We are an intergovernmental body, and we do what the governments of the world want us to do. If the governments decide we should do things differently, we would be at their beck and call." It seems as though the consensus was made before research even began. Unfortunately, standing up to the government's political agenda got many scientists fired, one of which was Murray Salby of Macquarie University in Australia. He was fired by the government for suggesting that much of the carbon increase in the last century was due to natural causes. Now, another scientist continued his research, and I'll go into a bit later. Now to the government's main argument of CO2 causing temperature rise. You guys remember Al Gore's graph where he showed, this is what my partner was alluding to, Al Gore's graph over the last 650,000 years where CO2 and temperature seem to be very closely correlated. But according to the Scientific American, if you do a closer analysis, you see that CO2 actually lags temperature by 200 to 1,000 years. So how can CO2 cause temperature rise if what we see in the graphs is the opposite? Now to Dr. Roy Spencer, who's the principal research scientist at the University of Alabama. He's the guy I was talking about who continued the research of the guy who got fired from Australia. So he continued his research and he analyzed the CDIAC's latest spreadsheet, which tracked yearly global CO2 source and sink estimates from 1959 to 2012. He found that outside some possible unknown carbon sinks, that 40% of the CO2 increase was natural. Now this study was fairly recent, but another study which assumes almost all the CO2 increase was due to humans. This study was a collaboration of research done by dozens of scientists such as Dr. Wallace Broker of Columbia University, Dr. Patrick Michaels of the University of Virginia, and Dr. Alfred Sloan of MIT, and there's like 10 more. But basically, anyways, based on the global warming potential of each greenhouse gas, which means how much heat can it hold based on its elements and its properties, human-emitted greenhouse gases are responsible for 0.28% of Earth's warming. I was really surprised when I found this. But I think Lowenberg, author of The Skeptical Environmentalist, said it best to what you hear from the politicians. Quote, "We need to be skeptical about a lot of the stories we hear and to put them in context. For all these reasons, I believe that human activity is not responsible for global warming."
Thank you.
Stand up, yeah.
I now stand open for cross-examination and points of clarification. The chair will now hear a cross-examination not to exceed 3 minutes in length. And we will need a second to...
That's okay. Thank you. May we begin?
I know what's it.
Okay.
That was 527.
So you stated that man-made carbon dioxide emissions hardly correlate with temperature rises. Is this correct?
Yes, according to Al Gore's own graph, it lags temperature.
You also, in supporting this claim, you quoted theskepticalscientist.com. Is that correct?
For which part?
For the very last thing that you said.
That it lags?
Yeah, well.
That was Scientific American.
You said skeptical scientist.
I said in my briefs Scientific American. But it's a generally accepted thing that CO2 lag temperature in those graphs.
I was just wondering if you think that skepticalscience.com or Science American are credible sources, and where you think that the authors of these sources get their information
I see that you're
from.
trying to say that the website looks weird, so why would you accept the website? The thing is that the information they use are from actual scientists. So when we cite scientists, the website doesn't say these things, the scientists say these things.
Do you believe that the evidence presented by scientists on skepticalscience.com and the like is unbiased? In other words, do you think the authors present a balanced view of their claims?
That has nothing to do with it. The scientists say something, no
I'm
matter what the website is.
The question's about the credibility of your evidence, which I think the audience is interested in learning about.
So you're asking me to question the credibility of scientists, essentially.
I'm asking you to the credibility of the packaging of the overall article.
First of all, I want to be something clear. The websites aren't saying anything. These are just blogs. I don't even think they are blogs. But the information is coming from scientists. So if you want to question the scientists, that's your own thing. But don't question the website. The website has nothing to do with it.
Right. You also stated that the carbon dioxide lag time discredits the link between carbon emissions and the Earth's temperature, stating that the lag time is up to 1,000 years old. Is that correct? 200
to 1,000 years old.
How do you explain the fact that these lag times are heavily contested, and some scientists think that they aren't pervasive in this discussion of long-term climate change because they may be as short as 200 years?
If they're as short as 200 years, that still shows that it doesn't cause temperature. You see what I mean?
You will also question the scientific consensus of this topic. I'd like to know, and your reasoning for that was that there were scientists that answered surveys. I would like to know what is your response to the fact that most scientific organizations, including the American Medical Society, American Physics Union, plus 23 others, have published statements against the stance that you've taken?
The thing is, all of these you're referring to government institutions. All these government institutions refer to the exact same survey done in 2003. And I actually had something refuting that, but I didn't have time to bring it up. Basically, essentially, the way they did these surveys was a keyword search.
It wasn't a survey, though. I'm referring to the fact that they published their own statements.
Referring to that. But essentially, what I'm trying to say is the surveys were done based on keyword search. And when someone, Dr. Klaus Martin Schulte, I can't believe I remember that, he repeated the survey and he found that actually 46% of scientists are on your side and 54% on our side, which shows that it's hardly consensus.
That's time. Thank you. You want to call the next speaker? Yeah.
We thank Sapan for that speech and welcome Sam to further the proposition of the case. Be great.
Hello, my name is Sam.
Hi, Sam.
Alright, I'm going to continue to start. So far, we have heard the opposition agree to the fact that humans can have some role in global warming without being the primary cause. Now, before I get into my refutation, I would like to indulge in the misconstruing of who is responsible and for what. Are we really to assume that humans can have some role but not the primary role? Am I to assume that the paper I use, the transportation I use, my food, my garbage, and my purchases are not the primary cause for global warming? When problems arise, hasn't rule number one always been to evaluate my own person and understand if I myself am the perpetrator? And if I am, well, for the time being, I am the primary cause of the problem. How can I even think of solving a problem when my actions help produce it? The opposition has to claim that natural causes are the primary culprit behind global warming, but we know from what Lauren has presented that it is impossible to blame nature. Instead, we must turn focus on human behavior. The opposition must make claims about solar activity, volcanic eruptions, and orbital rotations. In my refutation, I will address all these points. And one thing to note is that it isn't just CO2. Additional greenhouse gases all come together to create what we call climate change. Many factors, such as the methane leak during the Obama administration, or to merely be counterintuitive, rice cultivation's fumes are also one of many greenhouse gases that produce climate change. In other words, all greenhouse gases, including CO2, have a strong correlation and causal relationship. Just to give you something to reflect on, think of yourself working in an area where strong industrialization is occurring. Fumes are pouring out of big tunnels, and all you have is a massive congestion above you. You don't see the sky, but you see a monitor providing an image of the sky. Now, are you really going to stand there in a small covered sky telling us greenhouse gases are a hoax? According to an article published in AIP conference proceeding by Sloan T, they note that an increase in solar activity causes a net decrease in cosmic rays intensity, which, according to the causal connection, causes a decrease in cover cloud. cloud cover. This in turn leads to increased solar warming, that is global warming. The causal connection implied has been questioned on the grounds that the ISCCP infrared data give different results from the daytime low cloud data. In addition, the poor quality of the correlation after 1993 is noted. Similar questioning is done in other areas. Here we adopt the approach of looking for other manifestations of the causal connection, assuming that it exists, in order to corroborate the effect or otherwise. So it is a fact that global warming is happening, and it is due to our behavior. The problem with the argument that the sun is the culprit is that it is a mere assumption, an assumption that has been questioned and is under strong scrutiny. In a peer-reviewed article published by Thermal Science in 2015, it is stated that volcanic eruptions can cause a decrease in the Earth's surface temperature for a few years because particles of ash and dust combine with water vapor to form a dense layer of haze. This in turn reduces the amount of the sun's energy that reaches the surface. However, the effects of these eruptions on climate change is difficult to assess because the record isn't well documented and mostly based off of observational records, which are subject to interpretation. Nonetheless, most of the evidence suggests that the increased level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere as a result of these eruptions accounts for less than 1%. It is not only obvious, but factual that volcanoes cannot cause global warming. The emissions they output are relatively small if we compare them to human behavior. According to the New Scientist by Michael Mann from Pennsylvania State University in University Park, orbital trends cannot be the problem. He states, the gradual drift before the 19th century was driven by changes in Earth's axes of rotation. The planet's tilt increased early in the Holocene before decreasing again. It sort of wobbles. A greater tilt leads to more sunlight at the poles in summer, and this keeps the planet warmer. If humans had not begun warming the planet by releasing greenhouse gases, Earth would eventually return to an ice age. If we were following the orbital trend, we'd still be cooling. The figures suggest that the planet is now nearly as warm as its warmest point in the last 11,000 years. It is the case that orbital trends would have caused a cooling effect on the planet, not warming as stated by the scientists. And since this is not the case, that the Earth is actually getting warmer, we have to claim that human behavior is the main problem. To finish my refutation, I want to leave you with some new findings. The output of pollutants by humans is unknown and under-accounted for. According to the United States Environmental Protection Agency, using satellite data and ground observations, they concluded that the nation as a whole is leaking methane in massive quantities. Between 2002 and 2014, the data showed that U.S. methane emissions increased by more than 30%, accounting for 30 to 60% of an enormous spike in methane in the entire planet's atmosphere. According to NASA, most climate scientists agree the main cause of the current global warming trend is human expansion of the greenhouse effect. Warming that results when the atmosphere traps heat radiating from Earth towards space. According to NASA, gases that contribute to the greenhouse effect include nitrous oxide, carbon dioxide, and methane. And to focus our attention on methane, it is a hydrocarbon gas produced both through natural sources and human activities, including the decomposition of wastes in landfills, agriculture, and especially rice cultivation, as well as ruminant digestion and manure management associated with domestic livestock. On a molecule-for-molecule basis, methane is a far more active greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. Therefore, I urge everyone to vote for the government. Thank you.
Thank you. I now stand open for cross-examination and points of clarification. And face the audience, not your opponent, as you answer and ask questions.
So I'm going to ask a lot of questions, so you should be ready. All right.
Sure.
Were you aware that the IPCC was created to push the idea that human activity is responsible for global warming?
The IPCC, so why is that relevant?
Because it shows the bias behind their work. Anyways.
No, but let's.
Okay, don't you think that in the act of pursuing pure scientific fact, there should be no manipulation or political agendas behind the research?
Yeah, well, of course,
Yes.
but I also assume that any science done is done to prove
Some sort of political agenda. Okay.
No. So science is usually done with as long as the information exists.
Okay.
Yeah. So no,
Okay. If human activity, explain this to me. If human activity were really responsible for global warming and it was proved by scientific fact, why would you need to fudge the numbers of the consensus? You see what I mean?
I actually so this is in regards to funding.
This is regards to consensus.
So the funding causes consensus to be fudged.
Okay.
Okay. So now, where do you have actual evidence that these organizations
Yes.
have received?
Oh yeah, let me go for it. As evidenced by the government's funding of over $30 billion of climate research, don't you think it's ingenuine for the government to only fund scientists who push the idea that humans are responsible?
So government doesn't fund people that.
No, they do. They only fund people actually that are on your side.
Oh,
That's
so you have evidence that the government refuses.
Yes.
Oh, you guys have, and is that from a credible source?
Yes, I think it was Washington.
Over here.
Oh,
It's right us.
So is Washington Times. Another question. Do you believe it sets up a toxic environment and an obstruction of scientific truth that scientists such as Murray Balby, who was fired for believing the exact opposite by the government, don't you think this is an obstruction of scientific truth? And it kind of politicizes it.
Oh, well, so putting aside politics and funding.
But it's a huge part of it.
Yeah, no. Of course, it's a huge problem. But I mean, without getting without confusing ourselves of who's funding who and who's not being funded, because it seems very
Okay, seems like you're just...
it seems very controversial to assume that who you're paying attention to in evidence isn't also receiving support.
Okay,
But putting that aside,
I know what you're trying to do.
Okay,
I know what you're trying to do.
So let me finish. Okay. But
Okay, something I wanted to bring up.
Okay.
Notice how during this entire argument, in her cross-ex of me, she doesn't attack the science. She doesn't attack the lag. She doesn't attack how we brought up evidence that shows that a collaboration of scientists prove that based on all this human admissions, human activity is only 0.28% responsible. 0.28. Notice that they don't attack the science. They only attack the arguments. They only attack the website. The websites don't create any of this research. The scientists do. Notice how they don't bring that up.
can I finish?
Free country. People are dying in Iraq and Syria, so
Please.
you have freedom.
Sure. So if your primary concern is about funding, if your primary concern is about receiving information or evidence about global warming, so then just a very simple question, avoiding the things I had to say before, is why would you conduct research with a primary focus on sites
To push your political agenda.
that are not credible but use credible sources?
Okay, thank you.
Why wouldn't you?
Thank you.
Primary skill. Sure. That's it.
That's it, yeah.
We thank Steve for his extension to the proposition bench, and welcome Zach to make his extension for the opposite side.
How you guys doing? I'm Zach.
Hey, Zach.
So Sam explained a little bit about why humans are not responsible for global warming. I'm going to go into that a little bit in more detail. But first, I kind of want to give an introduction. I was also like Sapand. I also believed in the consensus and the 97% of scientists believing like humans are responsible. But then we started to look into it for this project, and after like researching it and really looking at possible like other alternatives. There's just too many other sources in nature that can truly affect, or that can affect the climate that humans couldn't be the sole major cause. They can't be the sole major cause. And I'm going to talk about three main natural events that cause global warming. One of them that wasn't brought up. Solar activity plays a huge role in global warming. There's a correlation between solar activity and temperature. And there are two-pronged. There's sunspot activity, and there is solar cycles. So basically, sunspots are storms on the sun's surface marked by magnetic energy. So how that works is the more sunspots there are, the brighter the sun is. The brighter the sun is, the more intense the rays are coming down to the Earth. The more intense the rays are, the hotter the Earth gets. Henrik Svenmark of the National Space Institute in Denmark believes that an effect related to the sun's fluctuating magnetic field may also play a major role in the warming. And that article is in 2013, so not 1993, I think it was. Basically, it's saying that there is scientists that do believe that this is a very valid explanation. The same is actually true for the opposite, as where when sunspots are dim and they're not as much, the Earth gets cooler for the exact same reason. This is seen in 1645 for the Maunder minimum. It was the little ice age that the great global warming swindle brought up. It is the most dormant period in which we have on the sun on record. Quote, the study shows that the regional climate is influenced by the sun and offers opportunities to better predict future climate conditions in certain regions. Currently, we are actually in a cooling. As I said earlier in the cross-X, we have been in a cooling since 1998. National Geographic, and this is because National Geographic News says the sun is the least active it's been in decades and the dimmest it's been in 100 years. Correlates very nicely. This just explains the cooling period we are in now. Throughout geological history, solar activity has been a major driver of temperature, and the two are heavily correlated. Solar activity has explained temperature rises, temperature falls, cooling and warming periods alike. On the other hand, CO2, as Stefan said, follows temperature and does not explain or even correlate remotely close to as much as solar activity does. It is because the sun and other systems are just so powerful. Secondly, are sunspot cycles. They're 11 years on average, and the shorter the cycle, the more magnified the heating effect is on the Earth. Same with the longer the cycle, the magnified cooling effect is on the Earth. The Maunder minimum went for a very long period of time, the peak of which was longer than most, which made it so cold and hence the little ice age. Climate scientist Gerald Meal at the National Center for Atmospheric Research and his colleagues suggest that solar variability is leaving a definite imprint on climate. Ultimately, we see that sunspots, sun cycles, and temperature correlate very well, and that solar activity has a much larger effect on warming than human CO2 emissions does. Secondly, is clouds play a massive role in global warming as well. So clouds act as reflectors of sunlight. They provide the Earth with a cooling effect. Formations of the clouds come from aerosols and cosmic radiation. NASA Observatory says most clouds owe their existence to aerosols, and they serve as tiny seeds called cloud condensation nuclei. Aerosols and cosmic radiation are basically the seeds that clouds need to form. So basically how this works is, as the rays of the sun come down, they begin to push aside some of the cosmic radiation particles. With less radiation or cosmic radiation in the atmosphere, there are less seeds for the clouds to form. The less clouds in the sky, the warmer the Earth gets, and because of direct sunlight radiation. Putting it together, we are actually in a double cooling, and I'll explain that in a sec. As I said earlier, the sun dims the sun's activity is very dim right now, one cooling. But also, since 2000, according to the International Satellite Cloud Climatology Project that NASA conducts, cloud coverage has increased from 64% to 67%, which means that there's more sunlight being reflected back into the atmosphere rather than here on Earth. This explains why we are in the second cooling effect. Lastly is volcanoes. They also play a massive role in global warming. Most people believe that the danger in volcanoes is that they emit too much CO2. They do emit CO2, but they also emit a lot of sulfate aerosols. And as I said, sulfate aerosols cause a cooling period in the Earth, or for the Earth. Here, quote from the U.S. Geological Survey, here, SO2 is converted into sulfate aerosols, which reflect sunlight and therefore have a cooling effect on the Earth's climate. For example, in 1991, the Pinatubo eruption in the Philippines of a volcano dropped the average global temperature of about 1 degree Fahrenheit on its own, and that's from NASA's Earth Observatory. This goes to show that if human activity and greenhouse emissions are as disastrous and powerful as people say, then how come one volcanic eruption can cause such a dramatic change in global temperature on its own? Global warming started 150 years ago, before anyone thought that human CO2 emissions caused all of this. Suns clouds, volcanoes, and many more natural resources that we didn't have the time to go into. All of these can explain cooling periods and global warming trends throughout history. And because of this, human activity is not responsible for global warming, and people are not as responsible as people are saying. My opponents to do is to explain the cooling periods from 1880 to 1910, 1940 to 1970, and the current period we are in, as I explained, natural systems such as suns, clouds. Yes, we're done. Sorry about that.
Thank you very much. I now stand open for cross-examination. Points of clarification.
Okay.
Sorry, do you want to-
Remember to face the audience.
Sure.
It's them you're trying to persuade. Don't look at your opponent. Okay.
So you guys have continuously brought up the statement saying CO2 follows temperature. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And what is the primary purpose of you guys using that evidence? Sure. Go ahead.
Sorry? CO2. I'm sorry. No. Yes, CO2 does follow temperature. The reason is it lags because when temperature increases, surface water temperature in the ocean increases, and the warmer the water is, the more CO2 there is.
Sure. Okay. So, but by saying that CO2 follows temperature, global warming can't be caused by humans.
By saying, sorry, can you say that again?
So CO2 follows temperature.
Look at the audience.
Therefore, humans can't be the cause. Of
Human emissions cannot be the sole cause if temperature is not caused by.
Sure. So, are you aware that that greenhouse gases are not only CO2?
Yes.
Okay. So, how would the statement CO2 follows temperature result in the claim that humans do not that it cannot be the cause of global warming?
Because in your first point, you said that CO2 was 86% of the greenhouse gases that you're using. So that is the majority of what you guys were trying to attack. So that's what we have.
Sure. But, so it was just a mere attack?
That's what we are going off of, yeah, because that was the majority.
Face that here.
Sure. Okay, and so just another question. If we just measured one of the hottest days in 2014, I think it was, or in 2015, doesn't that show that the sun cannot be the problem?
Well, our argument is that it's not just one of them; it's all of the natural causes that cause or that make it so humans are not as significant as you guys are saying. It's a combination of all natural events.
Excluding human?
No, humans are a small part, but we are saying that there are many other natural events that make humans very minuscule in that.
Okay, and do you think all human behavior is accounted for?
I don't understand what you're asking.
Do you think all, so let's say if we can perfectly measure the causes of the sun, do you think we can also have complete evidence of the causes humans have?
No.
So then don't you think drawing a strict conclusion that humans are not the cause is very problematic?
What we're saying is humans are not the main cause. We're saying that there are many other causes that contribute to this global warming effect.
Okay, that's it. Please.
Thank you. It's now time for the debaters to demonstrate their ability to engage in the 4 steps of refutation.
So we welcome Lauren back up to the stage to further their case, the rebuttal. We'll agree with 7-minute rebuttal speech. They close out the proposition.
Not 7 minutes.
Oh, no, 7, 5.
Yeah,
3-minute rebuttal speech.
3? It said 5 on the
Oh yeah, set
debate
5.
format.
okay, 5 you got.
3.
So, and we welcome
Let me
Lauren
know
to
when to-
close up the proposition bench with a 5-minute rebuttal speech.
The opposition's claim that CO2 emissions barely correlate with a rise in surface temperature is contradictory to a large and growing body of evidence. This claim does not take into account the overall emissions of greenhouse gases that does in fact strongly correlate with a rise in surface temperatures. This claim also does not explain the ice core record, which shows a direct correlation between periods of low carbon dioxide and ice ages and periods of higher carbon dioxide and warmer periods. Our claim that CO2 emissions clearly mirror an increase in the Earth's surface temperature is based on facts from credible sources, such as NASA's report on global climate change and peer-reviewed studies that cite a linear relationship between global average surface temperature and cumulative emissions of carbon dioxide. Now, Sapond attacked our argument based on funding that he believes is misconstruing evidence. However, support for their claim that CO2 emissions barely correlate with a rise in surface temperature, and who knows what else, is mainly drawn from blogs on the skepticalscientist.com and scientificamerican.com. We do not believe that these are credible sources and that this claim should be taken seriously based on this evidence. The article does not credit the author, so we have no idea whether it was written by someone with expertise or where the claims came from. The blog is clearly written by skeptics for a niche audience, not unbiased scientists reporting findings to the general public. Yes, the article does reference other sources, but the only place it does is below the graph, stating that the numbers didn't just come out of thin air, but were collected by credible sources. However, these numbers were graphed, packaged, and presented by the team behind skepticalscience.com and scientificamerican.com, and we do not believe that such a strong claim should be made based on this low quality of evidence. We believe that the opposition's claim that carbon emissions barely correlate with a rise in surface temperature is based on them drawing a sweeping conclusion based on what is, in the grand scheme of the Earth's history, small periods of time that are minute exceptions to the overall warming rule. Despite these short-term fluctuations, we would like to urge the audience to focus on the overall long-term warming trends that reflect increased amounts of CO2 in the air over the course of those decades. The opposition also notes volcanic eruptions as a major cause of natural climate change. However, we have presented evidence that the effect of volcanic eruptions on climate change is trivial, and that the increased level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere as a result of these eruptions accounts for less than 1% of humanity's emissions. In addition, we have presented evidence to refute the importance of sunspots and solar activity, as well as the changes in the Earth's orbit. Sam provided credible evidence from a climatologist at Pennsylvania State University claiming that changes in the Earth's orbit are unrelated to the warming trend. According to Spencer Ware from the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, the level of solar activity has changed so little over the past few decades, and therefore it cannot explain the recent rises of temperature. We attest that the argument presented by the opposition is not only flawed, but also of grave danger to all of humanity if adhered to. According to NASA's report on global climate change, many of the effects of global warming that scientists have predicted are now occurring and will potentially impact plant, animal, and human populations in every area of our world. Among these effects are a loss of sea ice, accelerated sea level rise, and longer, more intense heat waves. Other predicted effects include more frequent wildfires, longer periods of drought in some regions, and an increase in the number, frequency, and severity of tropical storms. The changing climate will not only displace human populations, but also prompt migrations and extinctions of many animal species. The effects of global warming are difficult to predict in their entirety, but I do not doubt that they will be both devastating and widespread. As citizens of this nation, with more resources and innovation than anywhere else in the world, we must take the initiative to deal with this issue. However, we cannot begin addressing how to combat global climate change without first claiming responsibility for it. There is a scientific consensus that the Earth is warming, and tons of evidence suggesting that greenhouse gas emissions associated with human activity is the primary cause. We are having this debate today because it is time for humans to claim responsibility for global warming. There is simply no time to delay in this issue any longer. On the first day of class, we took a survey. In this survey, not a single one of you said that you believed you agreed with the opposition on this matter. That's good, because 97% of practicing scientists don't agree with them either. We presented a lot of relevant evidence to support a claim that you all already held in the first day of class. Thank you for listening, and I urge you to vote in favor not only of our team, but also for yourselves and for the majority of the scientific community. Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go.
Oh,
Okay. So So the consensus has been debunked so many times. I mean, the first thing I searched for this debate was a 97% consensus. I searched up on Google. The very first search results showed, okay, it talked about how a politician said it once. And then the other 19 other sources have said 97% is BS, it's myth, it's wrong. So there's hardly a consensus. You say volcanoes are trivial. The point of bringing up volcanoes is not to show that it brings up less CO2 than humans. It does, we'll admit that. The power of volcanoes comes from the sulfates
Over
it
here,
emits.
over here. Persuade us.
The sulfates
you won't
emit.
change.
That's right. The sulfates that they emit are seeds of clouds, and when clouds, clouds have a net cooling effect. So what we see is, scientists have shown is that volcanoes have a net cooling effect with each eruption. And let me tell you something. If humans were so responsible for global warming, volcanoes would have no effect on our global temperature. But what you see when you look at the graphs, every time, right after, I don't know, you brought up the 1991 Pinatubo volcano. Right after every single eruption, you see a huge drop in temperature. Pinatubo alone caused the global temperature to drop 1 degree Fahrenheit. If humans were so responsible, there would be no drop because they would overwhelm the natural systems. But you see the exact opposite. Now, they brought up how the sun's output has changed a bit. And according to Dr. Lockwood, even a 0.1% change in the brightness of the sun can have disastrous effects. And they're equating CO2 rises to sun. You cannot equate the sun and CO2. CO2 is like a little molecule. The sun, you could fit 1 million Earths in the sun. And even if you equated them, and you said sun's output increased 50%, we would be done. You cannot equate the two. And notice how given the chance to attack the science on the lag and the 0.28% number, don't forget about that. The 0.28 number, which was brought up by not websites that are uncredible, Dr. Patrick Michaels, Dr. Alfred Sloan. And if humans were really responsible, and they could prove this, and if my sources were so incredible, they should be able to come up with at least one scientist that disproves them, huh? Instead of acting like this website is the most evil thing in the world. The websites aren't doing anything. The scientists are doing the research. So as I said before, the government's whole argument rests on the notion that CO2 goes up, temperature goes up. Never in Earth's history has this been the case. And even in the current warming trend we are right now, according to the collaboration of scientists which I brought up, if you take into account the concentration of CO2 and the global warming potential of CO2 and other greenhouse gases, everything that's been emitted by humans, human activity is 0.28% responsible for global warming. I brought this up in the brief. They haven't attacked it. They attacked the website. Attack these guys. Are you going to attack the Dr. Patrick Michaels, Dr. Alfred Sloan, Dr. Wallace Broker, and 10 other scientists? They don't attack those guys. And throughout Earth's history, CO2 has never been a primary motive. During the dinosaur ages, CO2 levels were 5 times what they are today. In other parts of Earth's history, CO2 levels were 20 times. If they were really right, if the government was really right, that CO2 has these disastrous effects at high levels, Earth should have been a pile of dust. But that didn't happen. Life went on. And there's so many things that are part of this natural system that overwhelm human activity. And you could see it in every single one of these cooling periods. If human activity was really responsible, there would be no cooling periods. This just shows that natural systems, the suns, the oceans, we could have brought in the oceans, clouds, volcanoes, Earth's orbit and rotation, all these are part of a natural system that completely, on their own, overwhelm human activity. And I think the ultimate test of who's right is to test it on predictions. In the early 2000s, the IPCC projected that at this moment in time, in 2016, because of the rise of China and India and all the CO2 they're emitting, you know what I'm talking about, they said temperatures would be up 2 degrees Celsius at this point. They're down 0.2 degrees Celsius. We're in more of a cooling period than we've been in a global warming period. So yeah, 80 out of the 135 years were cooling periods. Oh my God. And our guy, on Professor Miller's website, in 2007, I forgot what scientist, but he projected, he said, sun is at its dimmest it's been in 100 years, and he said that, off the fly, he said, I wouldn't be surprised if temperatures decrease in the next 10 years. That's exactly what happened. So the ultimate test of ideas is predictions. And the IPCC was way wrong, and our side, the natural systems, were right, as they've always been in Earth's history. So for all these reasons, Mother Nature is responsible for global warming.
Thank you.
We thank Spawn for closing out the opposition bench and this debate as a whole. We invite the both sides of the House to cross the aisle and shake hands and step out. Do you have a step out question? Professor, step out. You guys just keep sitting there.
Sitting there, yeah. Shake hands, keep sitting there. Now they have done their work, and now it's time to do your individual work by looking over your notes and deciding how you will vote for the government or the opposition, for the proposition or for the opposition. And once you do that, and then you rank them. Who is the best speaker, second best, third, fourth, etc. Yes, please.
Was the points or the ranks the 1 through 4?
1 through 4, yeah.
Points or the rank?
Point. And they're on a scale of 100.
Wait, points is the scale of 1 to 100? Or rank is
Yeah, no.
Right.
Okay, so you're just gonna rank the first and second, the winning and losing team, and then you're gonna rank the speakers by their points. So you just give a point of 1 through 100. The highest speaker is like the highest number of points, like obviously number 1.
So the best speaker would be 80, second 79, third 75, and fourth 72.
Does anyone have extra ballots?
Everybody needs ballot. We're out of ballots.
Oh, you can have both clips. Here,
We didn't make enough.
thank you.
Individual, don't look at other people's votes. You need a ballot.
So you're saying that it's on a scale from 0 to 100, but we should only really go from 70 to 80?
60.
60 to 80, yeah, because you have to be Jesus himself to get 100.
Yeah.
You have to be amazing.
No, you don't ever get above 85s at like
Yeah,
nationals.
even at nationals or worlds, people don't get.
Harry got an 87.
Yeah.
Harry got an 85. I'm not gonna vote.
And then we just bring
No.
Don't worry about that.
Okay, be prepared to stand, to say your name, and to say how you voted, and to give some positive feedback and some helpful comments to each speaker. Give your reason for decision. But first, Austin will help collect the ballots. Thank you, Austin.
Oh yeah, rip off your
Rip off your ballots.
Just pass it up to the right.
Pass them over to the right toward Rana, also known as Rona Barrett. Thank you.
I don't think so.
Don't worry about it.
Okay, Chris. Who's Chris? Who's this? You put aside. Make sure you fill out prop or op. You have to give a
Yeah,
decision.
really, the only thing you guys need to fill in are
Opposition, proposition, and then your points. Thank you.
and then you write it down. No, you don't have to. They don't need to put names on, right?
Are we handing the whole thing?
Just the one.
Just the one ballot, please.
There are also a lot of extra polls
No, you should keep. Oh,
You keep those for subsequent debates.
Did everyone turn the ballot?
Okay, quickly, we have a lot to get through, and I want to make some comments. Okay, can I have the ballots, please? Well, okay, let me start sorting. Yeah. You're going to be videotaped giving your decision. Thank you. Do I have all the ballots? Someone didn't sign their name or give a decision.
I thought Austin said we didn't have to.
You didn't have to put your name. But you need to put a decision. Well, I'm assuming it's not a low point win, so.
Thank you. Okay, let me, before I announce the tally, let me say a couple of things. Let's give them a big round of applause for breaking the ice. And, what? Are they gone now? For breaking the ice. I thought generally, let's thank the chairperson for getting their kids ready. So stand up and take a round of take a nice bow for that. I thought the briefs were well done. They cited their evidence for the most part orally. There was recent evidence. We had a debate over what was good evidence, and so that was excellent. On the cross-examination, I would like to see a little more follow-up on your questions. Don't just ask a question and let it go, but ask a follow-up on question. And remember, you're trying to persuade your audience. You look out here. You don't look over here. She'll never change her mind. Thirdly, the 4 steps of refutation. I'm looking to see, they said, I disagree because, therefore. So I'm looking for those 4 steps, okay? Especially, I was looking for, your refutation was excellent, but the impact of, therefore what? Therefore, this is true, therefore what? Therefore, what should we do? Therefore what? Okay. Okay. On a 5-19 decision, the decision goes to the opposition. Stand up, say your name, and say how you voted and why, and a couple of quick comments. Thank you.
My name is Yasmin,
Hi,
and
Yasmin.
I voted for the opposition group. I just thought that their sources, like, I'm so nervous I'm getting videotaped.
That's why you're in a comm class.
Just lost my train of thought. But I actually did like their sources. I agree with you with the fact that you said, I understood where you guys came from when you said that, those sites, they don't seem credible, but I understood what you meant when you guys said that it was from the scientists and not ultimately, not Wikipedia. So, yeah.
Quickly?
Hi, I'm Austin.
Hi,
I
Austin.
voted for the opposition. I think you guys did a really good job. Thank you all, by the way, for going first. No one really knows what we're doing, so for doing that, I think we all appreciate it. You guys came out really strong, and I think initially the speaking, the way you were speaking was more conversational. I think that contributed a little bit to the persuasiveness. I think you guys did a better job of really making your sources clear, because for some of the comments you guys made, I wasn't too sure where it was coming from, but I think overall you guys did a good job. Thank you.
Right. I think just to second something that Austin said, you want to be careful when you're quoting ultra-scientific data that it gets too abstract and your audience zones out on you. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Olivia.
Olivia.
I voted for the opposition because I thought that their arguments were really good, and also they had a lot of stuff to say during the rebuttal and things like that, and the questions that they were being asked, they had good responses to. The only thing I would say is that it was a little distracting. I felt like Sapon, you were a little bit kind of of a bulldozer, and it was difficult to pay attention to what was actually being said. So that was the only thing I would say.
Sometimes a bulldozer is good. Sometimes a bulldozer that hurts his or her credibility, and it'll cause someone to vote against him, because if you are too obnoxious, it will hurt you. Stand up for Jesus.
All right. I'm Kai.
Hi,
I
Kai.
voted for the opposition as well because I thought that they had better arguments against their opponents. Your guys' main arguments were the classic, Al Gore stuff, the CO2, and also just the consensus thing. And as we learned in class, consensus doesn't mean that it's correct. And actually, it takes a lot of courage and puts a lot of people's jobs at risks to be in that small niche arguing against. So even if there's financial incentive, you might lose your job being part of that 3%. So yeah, I just thought that your argument was better.
Thank you. Let's go to Rona Barrett.
Hi, I voted
Robin, can you give me a little light? Just one switch. Yeah, that's enough.
Hi, so I ended up voting for the opposition, not because I didn't think your guys' facts were good. I thought your guys' facts were better, but I just thought you let them slide with so much, especially during the cross-examination at one point. I'm like, oh my god, because he was just, Lauren, you were saying over and over again, you're like, it's not credible, it's not credible. And he's like, yes it is, yes it is. And you kind of have to take it to the next step, you know what I mean? He's like, they're independent researchers. You're like, well, independent researchers need funding too. Where does that funding come from? And even if he comes back and he's like, well, they're tenured, you could be like, well, the Northwestern guy, he believes in the Holocaust, he's tenured. One researcher over all of these government organizations. And I feel like you guys kept almost getting there, but it just let it slide. And I thought your fact about the rice field was super interesting, and I'm like, oh, tell me more about that. But it didn't quite get there, so I gave it to the opposition. And I really liked how you guys were conversational, and it was, but you shouldn't point out your partner and be like, you said this, you know what I mean? Be like my partner mentioned, kind of professional.
Well, just because it's on video for the world to see, you might have sounded like a Holocaust denier just kind of.
Okay,
no, I said he's a Holocaust denier.
Okay, just making sure.
My name's Victor.
I don't want video.
What's your name?
Victor. I signed for
Hi,
opposition.
Victor.
I signed for the opposition side just because I felt like the evidence was stronger. When he said 0.28%, that figure was really extreme. I felt like if that's such an extreme figure, it at least should have been combated or directly addressed, given that's such a low figure. But because there wasn't a direct refutation or bringing that figure up, it kind of rings some bells. Maybe there was some truth to that 0.28%.
Hi, I'm Jimmy, and I voted for the opposition.
Hi, Jimmy.
Too. I really like Sapon's during his cross-examination that he recognized that, I don't know if Sam was doing this intentional or not, but I guess he was trying to, stretch it out and take longer on responses. And I think one of the key components is to recognize that sometimes when it's cross-examination, if someone's being unresponsive, you have to point it out to the audience to demonstrate that they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And another thing I really like about you is that you kept reiterating the point that that there's like a there's a point I forgot what it was, but it's like a really good point that you reiterated that haven't been like a proof. I forgot a point, but it was really good that you just kept reiterating something that was like I thought that was one of their weaknesses. And I think you definitely recognize that there's like two components to the debate. One that's based on the factual level, another that's based on the ground level of the context of which the debate is based on. And because your guys' position is relatively weak, you focus on the strength, which is based on the argumentation of what the ground is based on. So you guys definitely won there, and I think that was really impressive because of the position where you guys coming from. So. Yeah.
Thank you. One quick comment about cross-examination. If your opponent is running off at the mouth, it is legitimate to shut them down. But, ultimately, you also have to ask closed-ended questions. As that great article by Kammaker and Milliker point out, that if you ask closed-ended questions, they can't go on. Isn't it a fact that you didn't read any evidence that refuted our point, right? All right. There's no room for if you ask closed-ended questions. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Alex. I feel like I'm
Hi,
the
Alex.
first person that actually voted for the proposition. From a factual perspective, I just thought your case was stronger. The facts that you guys laid out, I think, were I think the format of laying those facts out was more solid for me. And then also on the opposition side, there were certain cases that I felt kind of weren't as factual. Like, for example, when you talked about politicians being scientists being forced out because of their politics, I felt that was somewhat speculative. There may be other reasons why they were ousted. I think it's a legitimate argument, but also I think there are other cases just from a factual perspective that could have been explored. And then I think where you guys really lost ground for me definitely was in cross-examination. Other than that, I thought the case was strong from a factual perspective.
Yes, please.
I'm Casey. I
Hi,
voted
Casey.
for the opposition here. The reason being that despite the fact that I agreed with Alex here, that the proposition had just better information that seemed better laid out with pretty reputable sounding resources. I felt that the opposition brought a lot of good clash and was able to initially cast them doubt. I didn't think they were that strong in terms of their arguments. But that said, the opposition was only able to bring up just issues about the website's integrity. I was a little bit speculative about that. I was wondering why you didn't cite the sources that the websites were taking from as opposed to just using the blogging sites, which you guys kind of admitted to, and it sounded kind of bad. Aside from that,
Good, thank you. Let's go to Robin. Scientific American isn't exactly a weak website, but what do I know? All right, yeah. Maybe.
I vote for the opposition, and Sapon is. You're also good, Zach, too.
You're also what?
I admit that they both had a good delivery, but I like Sapon just for whatever reason. I connected with the way you delivered the information. Also, I'm on a policy debate as well, so I know some of the issues with the consensus, which is, I had a real big problem with that as well. And also the lag time between the CO2 and the temperature, which is really big. And then all those other factors that you guys brought in about the sun and the clouds and volcanoes. So.
Okay, thank you.
And the other side, obviously, they had all of the information that has already been, repeated thousands of times. So it was, for me, it was a little bit of noise because I'd already heard a lot of that stuff before. But they did an excellent job organizing the information.
Thank you, Robin. Yes, please.
So because I'm the group leader, I was able to get your guys' briefs beforehand, and I was reading through them, and I do agree that the proposition side had a lot better factual evidence. I agree with Alex and Ronald in that situation. Delivery basis, I voted for the opposition because I do think you guys were more passionate. I do think you guys had more pathos involved when you told your personal story of how you used to be on the proposition side and then transferred. So I related to that in that sense, and I do think that the proposition side had a lot more credible evidence, in my opinion. And when Lauren was doing her brief, I was drawn to it because it was constant evidence that was backing up what she was stating. Not that you guys did not. I just felt more appealed to the proposition side, but because of your delivery, I and evidence. I agree with you guys.
It's just a more compelling story then, yeah. Good story. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Julia.
Hi,
And
Julia.
You guys had the better story. You guys said it in a way that really made the audience connect to you. I mean, to go from everybody thinking that global warming is real from our first survey to the majority of people voting for the opposition says that they, on some level, whether it was factual or I think more likely it was the storytelling, were more drawn to your case. You guys did a great job. The evidence is really clear. You had really good quality sources from reputable places. I would say in general, try not to like cross your legs together or put your hands in your pockets or like go like that or put your hands behind your back, because even though like your cases might have been sound on paper, those physical tics will make you seem nervous.
Good. Thank you, Julia. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Lana. I also
Hi,
voted
Lana.
for the proposition. I felt that you guys were factually more sound, which a lot of people have said already. It was all very scientific, and you presented it in an organized manner. You guys, I think, did probably like as good as you could have done for being in kind of an unpopular position. But and obviously, you guys did very well with this class. But I think that some of the things, like Sapon in particular, I think sometimes you let your emotions take over your kind of argument. I guess. Like the 97% thing that you kept going on about, like I'd be very interested to know more about that, but you never really proved that that was not factual. You just said like, well, I Googled it and all 19 things said it was wrong, so it's wrong, kind of thing, which I understand is easy to do, but anyway, yeah, it was.
Okay, thanks. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Ellie. And
Hi,
I
Ellie.
voted for the opposition side. I thought I was going to go into it voting for the proposition side, and I thought, Lauren, your delivery was great the entire time, very confident, but what won me over is that Zach and Sapon, you guys laid out your points in a very clear way, and your explanation was very thorough, so I don't have much of a background knowing about climate change, and that delivery really convinced me to vote in your favor.
Good. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bianca. I voted
Jimmy, can you move over, please? Thank you.
I voted for the proposition, actually. It's been said over and over and over and over again, but I was really impressed by the factual evidence you guys provided to the class. Like, I thought that, I mean, kind of, that won the debate for me for sure, because, I mean, I'll admit that their delivery did have more pathos, as been brought up by Kayla, but Lauren, I thought you were very, very, very professional. That impressed me. So.
Yeah. Let's go in the corner here. Yes, please.
I'm Alex.
Hi, Alex.
I voted for the opposition as well.
Okay, Jimmy, move your head, please.
And I did so because generally the other side of the argument is what you hear mostly. So I already knew opposition had their back up against the wall, but they didn't act that way. They didn't bring about their information in that manner. In fact, they came out a lot stronger. They came out and it seemed like they were on the offense. So that won it over for me.
Great. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Maya. Good job going.
What's your name?
Maya.
Hi, Maya.
I was sold by presentation. Honestly, Sapon killed it for me. I really liked the passion, and in terms of evidence, I think you guys were equally great. One thing, I think a credibility fault happened when someone mentioned something about not seeing something that was in class, and then that's when I kind of went to one side. I mean, I kind of checked out. I know. No, I'm sure. But that's it.
Thank you, Maya. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Daniel.
Hi, Daniel.
I voted for the opposition. I'm also going to talk about like, the presentation very briefly. A lot of people have said a lot of good things already. But like, as far as like dynamism is concerned, that was one of like the important pieces of like making a good presentation.
Credibility, yeah.
Yeah, credibility. Like I think Sakib, like you had really great dynamism, even though and it kind of like it like offset some of the like steamrolling that we're talking about, or like being a bulldozer. I think that just like Alex said, you were in a corner, you're the opposition, so you kind of are in more of a place in a situation where you're expected to be a little bit more, active, seeming a little bit more active. The proposition didn't have their backs against the wall as much, and so good job there. And then Zach also really good job with your presentation. But I think that
outside of Sapon, the facts that were being presented, it was very like stoic, and since I'd heard so many times all this stuff about the proposition, it kind of like a lot of people have been saying it sounds like noise, and if there was more of like an emphasis on like what you're presenting, like this is really important and it's a fact that's been proven or something, I think I would be more willing to listen to it and actually maybe think about why the proposition might be right, although the opposition has such a great case against it. So just the presentation, going forward, I think it's
good. Thank you. Yes, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is David.
Hi, David.
On the internet as well.
You move your head a little, please.
For me, when it came down, I voted for the opposition, generally just because I thought that they did a lot better job of responding. For me, if I had to pick which of the four of you were best at just sort of displaying the points of the research, I'd probably pick Lauren. If I wanted to listen to a lecture, if I had to pick one of you to lecture for a quarter, I would pick Lauren. And the person that would be the lowest on my list is Sapon, just because when Sapon came out right at the beginning, it was very sort of like rehearsed, and I felt like he was reading a script. But as we sort of got deeper into the argument, where Sapon really started to shine was that he had really mastered the topics, and so he felt a lot more comfortable responding to the other sides in a way that I didn't feel from the proposition side.
Yeah, pretty technical, and sometimes some of the scientists that are out there are fighting for climate change. They're a little smug and a little condescending and a little technical, and sometimes it goes right over the head of the general public, and it's off-putting to some of the general public, and it doesn't work. Yes, please.
Awesome. I am Wyatt, and I would say I really like the opposition because of your feistiness. That's who I voted for. So both the teams had unique arguments, they had the right sources, but I felt like during the cross-examinations, you two just came out just ready for anything. And the passion was there, the knowledge was there, and my vote went to you because I like the presentation.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Yang. So I
Austin,
probably am the
ahead.
last one who voted for a proposition. Yeah, I just feel like Lauren did a very good job in the beginning in setting the standards for appraising arguments, because she said we want preponderance of evidence, and that's not just the quantity, but it's the quality of the evidence. So if I were voting for who performed best, maybe I would vote for the opposition team, but then if I stick to like her, but then the opposition team, when they were doing the thing, they didn't like disagree with what Lauren said. So I assume that they all agree that it's the preponderance of evidence and it's the quality of the evidence. And they do have better quality of evidence. I mean, like, as they said, like Scientific American isn't like scientists doing it. Sapon says, the website doesn't do anything, the scientists do the things, but then who select what scientists and what work goes into that, like, website. So it's biased, obviously, but Lauren didn't go like very deep into that, which kind of, I think that's like a pity because they could like go more into it. And also I feel Sapon's conclusion that it's kind of contradictory with what he said, like what Zach said earlier, because in the cross-examination that Zach said, he said human is not solely responsible, but human had some responsibility in it. But then when Sapon was concluding it in the end, he was like, nature did it all. I mean, human is a part of nature. Or if you say human isn't a part of nature, nature did it all. But earlier you said human has something in it, so it's like contradictory, which I didn't really buy it. Yeah, I think that's. And also a lesson learned is like the time management thing, because I think Sapon started out very strongly, but then when he saw the gesture about the time you got under the laws.
Got frustrated, yeah. Thank you. One comment I'd make really quickly about this website. This happened with Bjorn Lomborg. You know, look, refute the arguments that the scientists are making, not what website they're sitting on. You know, that's the best way to go. And if you're just going to guilt by association and say, "Oh, he's on the website, he obviously must be biased," it's hard to accept that line of reasoning.